Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and we've got a special kind of comics aficionados live stream. Obviously, yesterday we did the Adamantium Hour. We were talking about X-Men, but I had a video this week where I was kind of talking about a few of the recent DC free comics that they had given away, specifically Milestone Reborn, or I think it's Reborn. Returns, Milestone Returns, and the Represent comic. And, I got a lot of feedback. Most of it was very cordial. Even the people that weren't, didn't agree with what I was saying, but at least they were polite about it, and they made their points. Not that they're well stated, but I wanted to bring somebody on, obviously, that had a little bit more perspective on what we had just read in the Milestone comic. Obviously, Gevian, you worked with Milestone for a short period of time, and you knew the original creators. Specifically, I know you talked about that. Dwayne McDuffie kind of taught you how to write characterization and why maybe you didn't like some certain things because the writer had failed in their job to make you care about a character and things like that. So I thought you would be the man to bring in here and maybe kind of discuss some of the things that happened in Milestone Returns and maybe where they kind of missed the boat, specifically Reggie Hudlin.
Yep. Yeah, so just to give a little clarification, so I did work in the editorial department at Milestone. I started off as an editorial intern, and then was for a few months, and then was brought back to work in the editorial department as an editorial assistant. And yeah, and while I would not pretend to have had a close relationship with Dwayne McDuffie, I definitely had my opportunity to have a conversation with him about the craft of writing and even the craft of editing, as long as the other people on the staff at Milestone. And I would say definitely. First, I would say I didn't even realize the Milestone Returns issue was out when it came out. Some other colleagues of mine brought it to my attention. So after I got the link for and read it, yeah, it is very disappointing. It's a very disappointing read. And as you referenced Wes, we talked about it before. I said my main concern about the whole Milestone Returns effort or the reboot effort was the fact that Dwayne his creative voice wasn't going to be a part of it. And if you weren't going to get the level of nuance, sophistication that this kind of content requires. And that meant that pretty much fell on Reginald Hudlin. And I just think Reggie really missed the mark on this one.
So obviously the most negative feedback I got was the discussion or my assertion that I think Static Shock, the flagship character of Milestone, he's got his own graphic novel, he's got his own series. There's talk about him moving or having a movie, obviously headlining that he had a perfectly good origin story. Makes a lot of sense. He's in the middle of a gang fight. He gets hit with some gas that's infected with like some mutagen. Turns out it's all part of a master plan. But there's a little bit more to that origin there. There's a part where there's a gun and he has to make a choice. And he makes the right choice, and he doesn't kind of go for that. He kind of shows his character, then he develops his abilities. That's a cool origin. And if you think about what we're experiencing today, gang violence is still happening. It's still relevant to the times today. But they wanted to do an updated origin for the character, and they decided that the tear gas that he gets is in a Black Lives Matter march. Now, regardless of whether you think Black Lives Matter is good or not, these things have been happening for quite a while now. This is going to be very dated to a very specific point in time. And I don't know why you would want to marry the flagship character to something that, it's been very difficult.
No, and to your point, this also came up when I talked with some of my colleagues and just from my initial reading of it. It violates one of the cardinal rules of entertainment, which is you go for timeless. And one of the commenters when you put out the first video made that point. I responded to it. That's an excellent point because that's what it is. You always go for timeless as opposed to contemporary. You can address contemporary issues in entertainment, but you have to do it in a way where it's almost to a certain extent abstract. So just throw it out there. If I was the editor of Milestone Returns, which I'm not, I would have said just tied into protest movements in general. You don't have to even have a Black Lives Matter sign up there. You could have had any other sign up there that still spoke to the same issue, like no police brutality or whatever it is, or something that is even itself has become more timeless, if you will, in terms of a saying, no justice, no peace. without necessarily tying it into the Black Lives Matter. Now, I'm not saying that because I'm anti-Black Lives Matter. I'm a Black Lives Matter supporter. I've gone to marches in support of it. Because of its decentralized nature of it, there are some Black Lives Matter groups and tactics I don't agree with, and there's some that I do. But the simple fact of the matter is, in entertainment, if you want to contemporize something, you better remember that you're automatically making it into song. That's what's going to happen. It's going to become, like you said, it's going to become dated to that time. So if they felt the need to make that nod to it, to make it quote unquote relevant, I think what you find is it actually has the opposite effect that sometimes if you wanted to just address it as he's at a protest, because people protest all the time, they protested throughout the history of humankind, and tied to something more abstract than that, then I don't think anybody would have a problem with this. Other than you take it from what the original origins for Static was that basically when he got gassed, it wasn't at a protest, it was basically at a big gang fight, which I think at that point, to a certain extent, sort of dated that particular event and even the creators who wrote it at the time, because honestly, other than maybe LA and a few other places like in New York, people used to ask me, well, what are the gangs like in New York? I'm like, what are you talking about? There hadn't been gangs like that in New York for at least a good 20, if not 30 years. It just wasn't the case. And if people want to doubt what I'm saying, there's a wonderful documentary called Rebel Kings, which talks about exactly the neighborhood that I grew up in the South Bronx and what the gang situation was like before, probably during the 70s. And I could tell you as a fact what life was like in the Bronx in the 80s going forward. And it's like, it's night and day. But, you know, it's you never contemporize something to that degree if you want it to stand up to the test of time. That is, yeah, I just don't do it.
Yeah, it plus, you know, with the original origin story, they also included the Blood Syndicate, another really interesting take on like a superhero kind of team story. So now, you know, maybe they're going to have to redo that origin, stuff like that. So it feels like in order to kind of shoehorn the character into this moment, that they've kind of, you know, potentially in the future created more problems than things they've solved.
Well, yeah, and this is a marketing issue. So, you know, this is something else I discussed with you. It just depends on what audience you're going for with this. And the simple fact of the matter is, I'll say this and I'll tie this into DC Represent as well. At this point, for a certain portion of the comic book buying community and the audience, I would even say for a significant portion of the thinking critical audience, DC now has exactly all you guys right where you want them. What I mean by that is that if they wanted you guys to think, if you guys want to think that DC was going woke in 2020 and beyond, you guys now have two significant pieces of evidence that even someone like me who might want to give them the benefit of the doubt is going to have a hard time to counter at this point. And that's Milestone Returns and DC Represent. It's like, it is what it is. I mean, we'll go into this as we talk in more detail, but it's like if DC was not considering, or maybe they did consider it, just said, you know what, despite we having a certain portion of the audience who feels this way and is suspicious about movies and everything else, we feel the need to put out these two books with this kind of tone and sensibility. And all I can say is DC mission accomplished. And so now we're all going to go along with this journey and see exactly how it goes. So that's from a motivation part. And I don't know what Christian Cooper's motivation was in terms of writing DC Represent and the team behind that. I don't know what Milestone Returns motivations are in terms of at least this zero issue. But I know that if they were in any way thinking about that, they definitely drew a line in the sand on this. And then I can only attack things after that point based on craft.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Like, we don't know or can I say specifically DC's going, well, I don't know. I know that they gave two comics away, you know, and they certainly represent a certain point of view. We see the Wonder Women of comics, you know, it seems to be heavily leaning left. And I do want to say, you know, rest in peace, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Obviously, she's going to be in that comic book. I think she'll be the front and center, kind of the star of it now, that she's passed away, and that was very unfortunate. But, you know, can it all be coincidence is the real the real question, you know, but we haven't seen this in Superman. We have seen Superman kind of watered down and taken in a new direction, but I just think that was bad creative. I don't think that was a deliberate choice to do something new with like that with the character. We haven't seen it with Batman. We haven't seen it with the main line. So if this is if this is what Milestone is going to represent, and then they'll have some DC free digital comics, well, then no, I wouldn't. They're not really going away. They're giving away some of it, and Milestone, that's the tone that they want for Earth M or whatever they're calling it within their universe. But it certainly has to give you pause and wonder, is this the new creative direction for all of DC? That's still, that's TV.
Yeah, and I think
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think the only reason why that might be a stretch and why it might not be a stretch is that Milestone is definitely a particular brand, and it's designed to reach a particular audience. So even as I was talking to people about it, I said, look, once I heard about it would seem like it turns out it's going to be, I think it's all going to be but the digital distribution of the Milestone books. Like, if that turns out to be the case, because I haven't seen any official solicitations or anything along those lines, I won't be this. And that has nothing to do with anything other than I'm not a digital reader. So if you're trying to get me as somebody from the original run, a supporter of it, a fan of it, an advocate of it, a champion of it, to come on board with this, well, obviously you didn't talk to me, or you didn't bother to talk to anybody like me, because I'm not going to go buy this or read this digital. Just not going to do it. So it's regardless whether the tone, the sensibility, and stuff like that. What the DC represents thing, it's like that's clearly. I think a pretty good case to be made. They're saying we at the very least we want to acknowledge and recognize on some level what the Black Lives Matter movement is supposed to be about, or at least the issues that it addresses. So to me, I have to separate DC represent away from the Milestone thing, because I think it's too divorced. So, and I don't know who they're going for with a digital distribution in terms of this. If they just think that we're so strong, that the old audience is so strong for Milestone that we'll come alongside and support it, or they figure there's a whole new audience out there of readers who are on digital and they're just as hungry for it. Have at it, Hoss. But I just know for this guy right here, this particular reader right here, yeah, this digital, I'm not doing it. That's got nothing to do with the content or anything along those lines. So, and in terms
I think they're after your daughter. It's like, they want that young, more contemporary reader that's got a phone in their hand or a tablet with them at all times.
Yeah, then somebody that walking in the apartment needs to be fired, because I'm gonna tell you right this. Just like I didn't know about the Milestone coming out. The only way my daughters will find out about it is if I told them. And basically, they haven't come to me and said, "Oh, Dad, have you seen this really cool black superhero comic that I got free on it?" They haven't.
They don't know about it.
They haven't. Exactly. They haven't downloaded any comic books. And they've had these huge, I'm going to show everybody. They had these nice little tablets just like this. They had just about approximate the size of a comic book page. I haven't stumbled upon them once or snuck them on once to see anything that even halfway looks like a comic, but it's manga or American comics or nothing. This is a marketing issue. So the only people you could be aiming this at is somebody like me who has to bring in the rest of the herd to get them on board. So if you're not capturing, yeah, that's right. If you heard and the word, if you're not capturing me, it's a dead end strategy. So I just don't get it. You at least got to get it into print, and then I might gift the digital to my kids or something like that. But hey, vaya con Dios with that. I just don't get it. So
just to talk about some of the other issues with Milestone, obviously the other big issue I had was with Icon. We've talked about the character in the past. He sounded really interesting, something that you just don't see really in modern media, really at all. A conservative black man. You don't see it very much in movies, TV. You certainly don't see it in comic books very often. And obviously, this was kind of my introduction to the character. But somebody sent me this page, and I'm like, when I read this, I was like, "Who is this?" Because I just read Icon's speech, and in this one, he's he's being talked. He's being questioned by Rocket, his sidekick, who has a different ideology. I like how when you have Batman and Robin, there's a difference there because of generational difference. And here there's a difference just because by worldview, which I think makes a really interesting dynamic for a superhero team, and also kind of encourages people to talk, maybe work through your differences because we can all work together. Like, those are pretty powerful messages. But, she's questioning him, but your job, you defend rich white. And he's like, I defend people, that can afford my fees. And then I am wealthy. I enjoy a lifestyle you others share, especially if you take into consideration people of color. I find that distressing. But should I not be striving to be everything I can be? Should I be bringing my, he has definitely a different perception of the world or a point of view right here. And it's very interesting. Like I said, you don't see this very often, but when we get into what we saw in Milestone, the new Milestone, it's just condescending. He's telling, this isn't Icon speaking, obviously, because it's a completely different character. It's a completely different voice. This is like Reggie Hudlin telling all the readers, like, what giant pieces of crap they are. He's talking about, I've been waiting for centuries to leave because Earth sucks so bad.
So the thing is, this is somewhat of a mixed bag, but I see where you're coming from, but this is somewhat of a mixed bag. So a lot of this is going to depend on what the context is in terms of continuity. So if they're still pulling on the continuity from the old book, from the old run, this would be more like Icon towards the end of the run and maybe a few years after that. So yeah, the one part where he talks about he was basically waiting around to get off, that is true to the original continuity, if I remember correctly. The reason why he stuck along so long, and some people who have questioned some of the logic, if you will, of some of the Milestone books, is that a guy who basically gets stranded on a planet like this, where the civilization that was so advanced, they didn't even have LoJack to find this guy. But anyway, it's that he was only hanging around that part for long until the technology could catch up to the point where he could basically repair his ship and go back home. But so that part rings true. When you got towards the end of the series, the original series, because I haven't read it in a while, so I remember, they did move it into basic Icon, basically defending the Earth, if you will, against the civilization or the collective warriors that he came from, was a part of. Here, as an initial introduction, not knowing that back history, understanding that there is, at least continuity-wise, a basis for that perspective, then you would be right. It just comes off of him very otherworldly, very way up here godlike, just talking down and calling out everybody in the human race. Say, you don't understand. You say you understand love, but you don't really. You crucified Black Jesus, and that's all he talked about was love. And this is just an only reason. And if I had some kind of form of intergalactic LoJack, I would have been out of here the minute I crashed. I would have been out of here because I couldn't get out of here. I had to put up with you guys. And then the only reason I'm doing anything here is because this one over here, this young lady over here, wants to change the community and all that, which is a funny thing because while that's true, in the original series from that page you just showed, she did feel like he needed to do something for the community, but her perception of him, she all but called him a sellout. That's what the original conversation was. She all but called him a sellout. And he was like, whoa, pump your brakes, slow your roll. And that's the crux of the original series, is that you have these two very distinct perspectives. I'm not going to get into it. We're not a monolith, but if nothing else, at least as we are not a monolith in the sense that his one view, a very conservative view, his one very, maybe liberal view, is now liberal, so many things now, but more liberal views in the Black community. And this is what happens when you decide to engage in discourse like this. It doesn't mean they couldn't work together in a Batman and Robin-like situation, but this means they always had different perspectives and perceptions about what the problem was and what the solution was. And they challenged each other. And they not only challenged each other, they challenged other characters in the story and in the Milestone universe. Like I said, I keep telling people, getting Milestone or Comicology, please get, I think it was issue 5 and or 6 of Icon where he takes on the Blood Syndicate. That's what, to me, that's what the essence of what Milestone was about in terms of being able to create conversations, to create conversations about things, particularly like race in America. But yeah, this character here, this particular interpretation, it is so far removed from what the original Icon was and what that series conceit was, that it's almost like they're going to have to explain this when they start the actual run, because it's a totally different character. And even Rocket, it's a totally different character. I said, this is not the Rocket that I remember reading back in the day. So, and if that's Reggie's and Dennis's vision for what Milestone is going forward, then okay, and we'll just see whether it's successful or not. But like I said, I think they've given the anti-woke crowd plenty of ammunition at this point.
Well, it
Exactly.
also feels like they're doing a disservice to Dwayne McDuffie. Like he went out of his way to make characters that would make you think, that went against the grain, and to show you that, like you said, there's not a monolith here. There are different points of view, and you can get along, you can talk, and you can disagree and still work together and things like this. But I don't know, it's just a weird thing. I mean,
yeah, because Rocket and Icon on the same page to a degree that they would not have been in the original series. Not to this extent. Yeah.
I'm sure you've noticed it in modern comics. It's almost writers are afraid to write black characters anyway, but like the one approved way apparently by all of entertainment. If they're a young character, they have to be a super genius. They've got to be kind of frail looking. They can never really be athletic anymore. And it's like, can we have a little variety in the characters? And it feels like that's what we were hoping for with this, and they stripped it away.
Yeah, well, it's a tough issue because I had a discussion with one of my colleagues. I talked to a few people before I came on to the discussion today about this, and we were talking about the original Milestone run. And one character that came up was the Hardware character, and the person's critique of the Hardware character was that he said, because he had spoken to Dwayne about the character, and he said that basically the way Hardware was meant to be in terms of his intellect, it's pretty much he was supposed to be the smartest dude alive on the planet. So think like a combination of Mr. Terrific and probably Tony Stark. That's what he was. His problem with the Hardware character is that somebody that smart shouldn't have been that controlled by their aim. In other words, it should have been like he should have been smart enough to figure out a way to take Edwin Alva down, who was his antagonist in the book, without necessarily burning Alva Industries down to the ground or sabotaging it from within without. That was his critique of, and I think I got that pretty good in terms of the Hardware character. Now, I could counter that you can have people who are really brilliant and really intellectual and really smart, but because they have a character flaw, it's like you would react in that kind of way, depending on what your makeup was. I just like to use as an example, everybody don't start getting out the torches and pitchforks, Ben Carson. And if you want to have surgery performed on you, by all means, go get Ben Carson and bring him in. In every other area of life, I don't want to have nothing to do with Ben Carson. Okay, so I don't know. Bro, don't tell me how to manage my finances. Don't tell me how to run my marriage. Don't even tell me how to drive a car. But if you want to talk about brain surgery and something, oh yeah, I have discussions with Ben Carson all day. So it's even, I'll use the Black Panther movie. Oh my God. I can't tell you how many discussions I have about the Black Panther movie, where it was like, because he wasn't Black Ubermensch, that basically the movie was pointless. It wasn't any good. It was like, well, his mother was more compassionate than him. His sister was smarter than him. Killmonger whooped him. And I'm like, have you guys ever, it's almost like, have you ever even read a story? It's like the villain always in some aspect of the story, in terms of the hero, has to be a little bit better than the hero. The villain's real weak spot is that he doesn't know what his weak spot is. The hero's advantage is he knows his weaknesses and then can build and improve upon them. So it's like, you're sitting around for decades and decades asking for a nuanced portrayal of Black people. You get a nuanced portrayal of Black people, it's like, man, I don't want that. That sucks. Like Killmonger. I had guys coming at me saying the reason why Killmonger wasn't a great character because he killed his woman. I'm like, he's a villain. What do you expect him to do? He had one goal in mind, which was to get into Wakanda. And how was he going to get into Wakanda and take over his actors' revenge? He was going to do that. He did kill the white guy too, Claw, in case you missed that part. But I'm just saying, at a certain point, it's kind of like there was a movie with Denzel Washington, I think it was American Gangster, and I think it was the Vietnamese guy who was helping to run the drug system. You know, like, Frank, are you ever going to realize when you're winning? And I'll leave it right.
I don't know. I was disappointed. Obviously, you know more about the characters, and I was expecting probably not exactly the like what we had on the previous page. I wasn't expecting something quite like that. I don't think you're.
No. I'll say to you right now, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. All I can say at this point is that if anything else, hopefully those people who are actually interested in the flavor of Milestone that I've been so effervescent about, so magnanimous about, so I have promoted and put out there, is that this is the time to take the advice of John Lennon when the Beatles broke up. Just go back and listen to the old records. Go buy all the runs on Comixology. Go to mycomicshop.com. Go to your local comic store and just get the old runs. And then at least that way you get the experience what the rest of us experience, which I think was a line of comics that deals with this particular issue, particularly of race or ethnicity. That for whatever it's both its positive things and its flaws, because there are some flaws into it. To open discussion, get a sense of what it could be. So, like somebody said, that we were just all in love with the idea of what Milestone could be in '92, and there was a lot of ways in which it didn't live up to that idea. But I thought it was a pretty damn good story, and that's how I look at '92 Milestone, about the original Milestone. It was a good start, and there's a lot of lessons to be taken from there, and there's a lot of lessons to be improved upon. But if you want to talk about, because there was one scene you brought up in there with Rocket in your video about the guy who was either a new version of Hardware or a new version of Cobalt. I can't make out which one. He is Cobalt. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's so they turned Cobalt into a white supremacist. All right. So
well, it's weird because this is like the introduction. It's not even clear that that's the case. Like when she says he's clearly racist, you know, and the life of privilege is misshapen his worldview. Where did she get that? You know.
Okay, so if I'm going to go into the context of the story, this is why I'm going to give benefit of the doubt. So let's say in terms of the story itself, the only way that she was able to make a comment like that, legitimately make a comment, is because basically now Icon is Ozymandias from Watchmen. He's monitoring these guys 24/7, 365. And so he has shared with her this information that basically Cobalt is a white supremacist. He's killing multiracial cultures. So that is the story basis. That's the story basis for her making that comment. If, from the reader's perspective, you not being privy to the information, if you're reading the scene, then you're going, what the did she get that from? I just like, and so I would chalk now the con against this, where I'm not giving the benefit of the doubt to Reggie, where I chalk that up to is poor writing. That is not a good setup for her to make that kind of a comment. As I told somebody else, if you're going to engage in this kind of subtext, because this ain't even subtext, this is just right there out in your face. Because I don't know what the opposite of subtext is, if it's phone text or whatever it is. But if you're going to engage this kind of subtext, for those of you who are watching the series The Boys on Amazon Prime, and I just started watching season 2. I think it was out of episode 3 or 4. And I'm going to spoil it a bit. So if you haven't caught up yet, you might want to mute your phones or video for a couple of minutes. Where basically the Starlight character is working with Huey, and they basically reveal to the world the Vault Corporation's big secret about Compound V. And so one of the characters, A-Train, who happens to be a black character, it's as opposed to a black character in the book, basically confronts her because he was aware she had it about, were you the one who did this? Were you the one who made this revelation? And she was like, yeah. She's like really proud of herself. So he's like, yo, you never F with the money. You don't F with the money. You can like have whatever opinion you want. You don't F with the money because when you do that. And she was like, well, you know, there are more things more important than money. So if you haven't figured out by now, Leslie over here, Starlight, maybe Morgan Serpent over here, Chris over here, Adrian. And she's like, well, there are more things more important than money. So what he says to her is, he's like, you know what? That sounds like something that somebody would say who's always had it. And that's his response to it. So what do you have there? Very short scene. You have these two contrasting opinions. One person is saying that you have to make change, do the right thing no matter what. And somebody else is saying there's a consequence to that. There's unforeseen consequences. That when you do those kind of things, it sets up something where she has a point, but she now has to think about her part of it. He has a point, and he doesn't have to confront the part that he's not thinking about, which is, according to at least the series anyway, I don't know if Starlight comes from money. As a matter of fact, in the series, I think she pretty much came from like maybe a poor, a poor community or a rural community before she started enjoying the riches. So there's a lot of assumptions, there's a lot of preconceptions, And the way the scene is written up, it leaves you room for interpretation for the audience and also to explore those two point of views later on down the line. That's how you write that scene. This right here is not how you write that scene. It's just this.
It's weird. It's kind of laughable, and it's also something that I think a lot of people can relate to in the comic. Maybe a lot of the storylines and things are specifically catered to a Black audience. When you talk about interracial couples, I'm in an interracial marriage. Both of my brothers are married to Black women. A lot of the people I went to high school, I went to high school in a little town in Missouri. There were only white people in the town. A lot of us are married, have interracial marriages right now. This is kind of the things that we can kind of like understand, but this is like laughable. Like,
oh no, wait, Cobalt against the swirl. That's all this is. Cobalt, hashtag Cobalt don't like swirl. That's what it is. I mean, it's like, it's almost like they just kind of didn't have a sense of the moment. And part of me almost wants to say, like, because of the fact that the Milestone revival was pushed off for so long due to the legal issues and stuff like that, I don't know if they came up with stuff in the last few months, if this is material they wrote way back when, but I'm almost going to have to lay all of this at the feet of, if not, so not knowing how it finally got to the final product. This is where you would think an editor would step in and would say, look, the way you wrote this scene, it's not enough information for the reader to have to not come up with Raquel sounding like this, or it's like, where is she getting this from? I mean, as an editor who serves an editorial assistant at Milestone, who has worked informally on other projects, because I have not done it professionally in the industry, who does it with my own work and some other people's work where they ask, this was an easy catch. This was not because, you have to change your point of view on this, because that's not what it is. If the creator wants to say, look, I think there's room for this and there's a story here, fine. But you have to help the writer or the creator present it in a more believable fashion. It's not realistic, not like, because even what Raquel says, I've had conversations with people like this when they talk about cops and police brutality and things along those lines. That's not how a person talks. Now, there is a way a person like that talks in real life, which is on social media. But in terms of actual conversations with people, that is not what they talk. They would have said something like, well, the only reason why he's doing that is because he thinks he can get away. That is if the guy's white. The only reason they think he can do this is because they think he can get away. That's a more naturalistic that's a more realistic way of saying that than basically code word. Like, well, he's racist. Okay, like I said again, maybe it's because they're sitting there in the Icon Tower and they're watching everybody and everything, and they're about to unleash their grand Watchmen scheme on the Milestone universe. And that's what this take is on the characters, and what she said makes sense. So we'll have to wait until the Icon Rocket series comes out and then drop the gavel at that point.
It was kind of weird. Like, I imagine this is a subject that was important to Dwayne McDuffie. I believe he's in an interracial marriage, as I understand it. Yeah. Like I said, me and my brothers are. It's weird. You're originally from Brooklyn. You live in Chicago. I'm from a small town.
There's no Bronx. I'm sorry. The people from the Bronx and Brooklyn understand why. Go ahead.
You're from the Bronx, but you live in Chicago now. I'm from a tiny farming town in Missouri, but as soon as I turned 18, I joined the military. I've lived all over the world: California, Alaska, Texas, Nebraska. I was in England. Korea, Afghanistan. I kind of am a world traveler. These issues with interracial marriage are weird. Like, people that you would think are the nicest people in the world and didn't have a racist bone in their body, and you let them bring their son or daughter bring somebody home from a different race. Find out what happens.
Oh. No. It's to serve. What is guess who's coming to dinner? It's not new. And speaking for someone who has had that mentality, who has had that perspective on it, if you're open-minded about it, let's say if you're open-minded about it, if you're a human being who's constantly growing, evolving, progressing, you come out of that. You have to realize that's a form of bigotry. Now I am going to do some little inside talking to outside because I don't care. It's like back in the day, be like, man, why are you running over to the oppressor? Why are you doing this? And I have no problem with somebody marrying somebody interracially. He's a great guy. He's good with children. We have the same goals and this and that. The only time I really just have no tolerance for the interracial thing is you say, well, all black men suck. No, you just needed the wrong black man. Sorry, I don't know what to tell you. There's plenty of us who are black men who have wonderful relationships with our wives. We have wonderful relationships with our kids. And if you don't, 9 times out of 10, it's because of your particular human nature. You just don't want to listen to your wife. You don't want to compromise, whatever it is. But people who basically think I'm dating outside of the race because the race sucks, that's the only time I'm just like, you're entitled to that opinion. That's your perspective. But I'm not joining the bandwagon on that. But if my daughters came home with a white guy, brown guy, white guy, my wife, we had this conversation at one point, and we both came to the conclusion, say, look, as long as the guy believes in Christ, because we are Christians, as long as the guy believes in Christ, he puts him preeminent, and he treats our daughter right, I can give a crap. And if you can't provide support, but just build a relationship, have a relationship with our daughters that's worthy of it and worthy of yourself. And that's it. But yeah, it is an issue. You're fooling yourself into thinking that women, as enlightened as people can possibly be or they claim to be, you walk in there, you catch them on the right day and hit the right nerve, bro, you'll find out.
Hey, the angriest you'll see like a random person you never met. Both of my brothers are married to black women, but they are sisters, Tiana and Tameka, and they have a brother, and he's a successful man, but he is attracted to women outside of his race. So go to a party and say, hey, so and so's coming over. He got a promotion at work, and then when he shows up with his white girlfriend,
yep, it's over, son. You're done. And that's the funny thing is that we have to get to the point where we have to start having honest conversations with each other about what's really going on. And this is why one of my friends asked me one time, he says, will we ever get over the issue of racism? And I said, at this point, no. And I said the reason why is because I'd always bring the stat up all the time. And I'm just bringing up the stat for white people because it's put out. Is that if 91% of white people don't have people from other ethnicities in their social circle, then it's like they don't know. At the same time, I had to say to one of my white friends when it came to one time about this police brutality stuff. I said, look, I don't know what conversations you guys are having over on your side of the fence. Y'all need to change these conversations. Because I'm about to be getting lit up 9, 10, 15 times because I get pulled over because my tail light is out. And because the guy asked me for my insurance and I go to get my insurance and he thinks I'm about to do something. No. Everybody needs to start having different conversations within their own groups, personal, private, personal, public, whatever it is, social circles, in your own ethnic groups. We all need to start having different conversations with each other about each other and about ourselves. Be honest about your own prejudices. It's just be honest about it. And then you'll get to a point where you can forge the kind of, I think, atmosphere, the kind of culture, the kind of country, the kind of world that we all want to have. That's what's so important about the Icon Rocket conversation from that original run that you went up there. They basically told each other exactly how they felt about each other.
It's crazy though. If you see things online, if you're honest about what you, or you have an honest question, if it's not approved, you could lose your job these days. They will report it to your employer. They'll be like, "God, this violates our policies." Like, I asked a question. It wasn't a statement.
I know, and it's crazy because I know it gets, and because I'm not real familiar with the term microaggression and stuff like that, and you don't want to deny, like some people will say, I don't feel like I have to answer every question to my white friends about black people in the black race, and sometimes you just don't feel like doing that. Some people are not interested in it. They don't desire it. They're not designed for it. And that's okay. They have a right to not want to have those conversations. I think I can speak for my wife, we've always welcomed those conversations simply because of the fact that people don't know. As long as you don't ask me a question disrespectfully, I have no problem answering the question because I'll just tell you the truth. Somebody asks me, well, how do white people feel about cops? I'll tell you the truth if you want to hear it. You just have to listen to what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that I'm not opposed to you having a counter argument. I have discussions with people like this all the time. Basically, the 3 rules are, as far as I'm concerned, is don't disrespect me while I ask the question, and I won't disrespect you while giving you the answer. Be candid in your answers, and don't yell. And you can have perfectly good conversations, not where it gets resolved in that particular discussion, debate, or argument, but at least you keep the door open to have the next one. Because a lot of this is going to be about information. A lot of this is that as any meaningful relationship, any meaningful friendship, both people are learning something from each other. And that's what I like about the whole icon with rocket dynamic, is that they don't agree. They really do have 2 completely different life experiences and have taken different things away from them. But they're willing to say, I just think you're a sellout. He's like, wait a minute, now how am I a sellout? Am I a sellout because the simple fact is I try to do this, and that, and make this choice with somebody made it over here? But the same thing goes for icon, where there's certain things he just bonded himself to. A lot of people don't believe in systemic racism, don't believe in institutional racism. And at a certain point, you got to start asking yourself, whatever the reasons may be, if everything is supposed to be the same and equal, why are you getting one result over here and one result over here when the circumstances are the same? And even if the reasons for it are not what this person believed originally, that person believed, something is going on. Just get to the answer and do it together, and do it honestly, and do it candidly, and do it without holding on so tightly to your ideology or to what you want to, or your philosophy, that you can't be open to new information, truthful information. That's all. So that's what art should do. That's what art should get you.
It's crazy. I see people like, we are coming up on election. People are already talking about, yep, lost 2 friends today.
No, and if that's the case, then the only reason why you should lose a friend over something like that is that either Charles Stanley, who is I would say, for lack of a little description, a white evangelical preacher that I listen to all the time. And he was talking about how do you have peace with other people. So he says the thing is, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, the most important question is, do you value the relationship? If you don't value the relationship, he says you might as well just wrap it up, pull the shade down, turn off the lights, and leave the room, because it's done. Because if you value the relationship, then you will work to have those conversations. So honestly, there's some people, when they say to me, well, I should be a peacemaker. No, I don't. I don't have to do that. My wife, I have to strive and challenge me. My daughters have to do that. People I consider my best friends. Other Christians have to do that. People whom the Lord puts on my heart to do that, or people who just really need my help from a human perspective have to do that. Somebody who's just convinced that all Black people are this, and that, and so on and so forth, or all poor people are this, or all women are that, and it's like, you're not willing to at least, hear this out. We don't have a relationship. I don't have to put up with that. I can just say my piece and just keep it moving. Now that's one thing. Now we're talking about civil discourse, which means we all go into a public medium, like, let's just say Twitter, because we all know this doesn't happen in Twitter, but let's just say Twitter. And if I express an opinion that doesn't agree with yours, here's a hint to everybody. I don't have to agree with that. I don't have to believe it. I do not have to say, I don't have to subscribe to that because somebody said it. I can't counterpunch and say, well, but I don't have to make you lose your job. I don't have to ostracize you from the community just because you're saying that. Now, if you're saying certain things while you're coming at me with a knife or a gun, yes, now I get to ostracize you from the community, and now I get to shut it down. But it's like, it used to be like sticks and stones, they break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And sometimes, because I know somebody about this, sometimes the words can hurt you, because if you're saying those words as a policymaker, as you're signing a piece of legislation, you're damn right those words can hurt you. But the simple fact of the matter is, this idea that because somebody expresses an opinion that is counter to yours, therefore they must lose everything that they have, that means you are fundamentally on both sides, because both sides have done it. Let's remember, rest in peace to Dixie Chicks. That both sides is that you don't believe in the Constitution. You don't believe in free speech. You can say it all you want. You don't believe in free speech. Free speech only says the government can't tell you what to do. The government is the only one who basically, but everybody up. I'm sorry, I think I might have misrepresented that. Is that definitely the government cannot dictate and control your free speech. In every other aspect, a corporation who hires you can say, look, you got to go because you're messing up my bottom line. Mm-hmm. People believe in free speech to an extent, should allow people to speak. You can shut people down if you want to, but you shouldn't if you believe in free speech, because that's why we don't allow the government to do. Because a jacked up opinion today may be the truth tomorrow. That's
or
what
the
it comes
truth
down
today
to.
Could be very jacked up in 3 weeks.
Oh, that's right. Or the truth today could be the lie. Exactly. So you have to allow for discourse, because we have to presume that people will make stuff up based on their own self-interest. They won't tell the truth to the benefit of the community. So it's look, we had that conversation about cancel culture, and then people will probably think that I'm being disingenuous and saying like I believe in the cancellation of Linda Fair's team. It's like I do, and I still do. And I said why? Because she was wrong. That's it. You're wrong. Admit it. Move on. It means we're gonna have to look at all the cases now, and maybe have to let some people go. It means now all the other cases of people involved with the exonerated 5, to some of you still known as Central Park 5. You were wrong. That's a fact. You got the wrong person. Any other thing you're talking about where somebody's just saying, look, I think that more white women should raise up against their husbands or something like that. You should be fired. No, that's their opinion. Now they're also entitled to the consequences of their opinion. If you work for, let's say, the Department of Family and Child Services, and they say, look, as an organization, what you said doesn't represent what we think, you're fired. That's on you, because you didn't have to say it. Like I said, the great.
Sorry, sir, your pedophilia jokes are not going to fly in this industry.
Basically, exactly. I said, sir, as the great Eric Brickshaw says, before you say something, just ask yourself one question: is there any money? After that,
so, talking about is there any money? Let's get to this last comic book. This was the Represent #1, Christian Cooper. Obviously, I think everyone knows this story. That's what I don't understand about this comic. It's supposed to be about sharing stories from underrepresented voices, but it feels like everyone knows his story. It's a different kind of a weird retelling. He's kind of aged himself down. They've certainly changed some of the physical characteristics of the woman that was calling the police on him. Said, "You're an African American man," which was pretty embarrassing when you say stuff like that. And she obviously lost her job and stuff like that. This feels weird for a DC comic. Is this an underrepresented voice? He is a minority, but everyone knows this story. Couldn't they have used this time to tell a story we didn't know? Or is this even a DC comic?
I say this. So, first of all, it's chapter 1. So I was not aware the series was coming out. I don't pay attention to that degree. So I'm assuming this will be a chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's an ongoing. It's not a one-off. So the only thing I can say about this is an underrepresented voice. Some people would say all African American voices are underrepresented. So I'm not going to dig into the weeds as to whether his story is underrepresented or not, or whether it definitely is a famous story. People know the story, and they're just giving. And so when I hear the underrepresented thing, it's more like underrepresented creators in the industry as opposed to an underrepresented voice, in particular case, his voice.
Because there's an interesting part in here where they show one character, I can't remember his exact name, is from like 1999 or something.
Yeah,
it was a case I don't think got as much publicity as it probably should have.
No, that would have
been more interesting for this comic.
Oh, it was well known. Oh no, the Amadou Diallo story was well known. Bob Dylan wrote a song about it, a protest song about it. It was well known, and as a matter of fact, that shooting took place in the neighborhood where my aunt and cousins lived, and I went to junior high school in the neighborhood. The cops who were involved in that shooting, it was some kind of undercover squad or whatever. They used to drive through my neighborhood all the time to go do their patrols all the time. So it's an interesting link that he went that far back to bring in the Amadou Diallo thing. I understand why he did it, because it was a big deal in terms of the circumstances behind the shooting and really everything that followed upon it. And actually on Netflix, there's a series now, I forget what the name of it is, but some kind of crime thing where they talk about different like famous stories from like, I think like the 80s or like the 90s. And his story is featured as one of his 41 shots. You should definitely check it out to get some more context for that particular incident. But it's like, I showed this issue to my wife because she doesn't read comics. So her comments were, it was nice. She understands what they were trying to do. and I asked her one question. I said, "Do you think it moves the conversation forward?" She said, "No." And I said, "That's what I think the failure of the book is. I think if Christian Cooper's goal was the very two words at the end of the story, in memoriam, mission accomplished. Got it done. Nice bunch of shout outs to all those Black lives that have been extinguished, if you will, exterminated before their time. If that was the case, to acknowledge that, then fine. The content in between, I just didn't see where he was going with it, other than just to say this happened, that happened, and in my experience, that I didn't. So in terms of from a storytelling perspective, so that's why I said at the very top of this, I said some of this stuff I can't speak to because I'm not the writer, I'm not the editor. I don't know what DC or was it Maggie, whatever her name is, Maggie with Christian Cooper and everybody. I don't know what they were trying to accomplish with this. No, Maggie was the milestone. What they're trying to accomplish with this. But in terms of a story, if you're trying to get people to have a different conversation about this, that doesn't accomplish that. It's just saying, here's a fictional story about what this could look like. And as he says in the thing itself, what happened to all these other people referenced in the story, that passed me by. I didn't suffer that. But it's important to acknowledge these people, and apparently at DC, it's important to do that too. So if you're saying, this is us saying we're in support of what happens to underrepresented voices or Black Lives Matter, whatever it is, mission accomplished. You got it. Again, I don't know what that does for somebody like me or some of the readers in your audience, but again, my wife is not going to read that book unless I show her.
It almost feels like DC just wants to be able to put out a press release that said they did it.
Yes, I give you that. I know, that's what it is. So if that's what the goal of it was, the mission accomplished. If the goal was to open up the conversation, then it's like, I'm not going to give you that. Because what I found interesting with the pages you have up right now is, and I'll leave the fact that they made a complete Karen to the side. But it was interesting because when you look at least with the facts that I think have generally been known, was that he was out bird watching. She had the dog off the leash. He asked her to put the dog on the leash, and she basically did. And I don't remember all the back and forth because I know it was recorded. But then at some point he pulls out the dog treats to try to lure the dog over to him, which I think everybody pretty much universally agrees that was weird. And then it got to when she saw that, and it was like she felt threatened by that because he was like trying to get a dog. That's when she went to the old, and I'm going to have to say it, guys, racist bigot trope tactic of, I'm going to call the police because you're a Black man, and when I call them, they automatically take my side. It's a fact. It happens. People do it. People from other ethnic groups do it to the same ethnic group. So let's get over that. So, and so when they write in here, he says, I can escalate this if I need to. That, much like the dog treat thing, now in real life was weird. That in the fictional thing is weird. It's like, just call the park ranger then. I would be like, I've done this one time in life where I said to somebody, you really don't want to go there. I said, no, do you really want to go there? And this was somebody who was harassing my wife, then proceeded to harass me on social media. And I said, do you really want to go there? And what I meant by that was, and I'll be clear about what I meant by that was I was like, because if you do this, then we will call the police, we will file a court, we will take whatever legal action it is, because that is a thing, because you have no right to be sitting up here harassing us like this over nothing. And then when it did go through all of the legal rigmarole, with this person who was an ethnic person, when I say ethnic, in other words, non-white, went and filed certain papers against me, and we had to go down there and go through the whole disposition of it. When the judge asked her, how did Mr. Dargan threaten you? This is literally what she did. Hold on. So, so all I say is to say this, is that one day I shall write a story about that, those things. And the purpose is to move the conversation, because the issue is it doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is when it's a white woman, a brown woman, a Black woman, a yellow woman, and the same differences with men on the other side. There is this idea that if I dial 911 and you're a Black man, basically certain things are most likely to happen. But that line right there, it's like, as a Christian, I'll say, where's the peacemaking in that? Where's the peacemaking in that? Whereas, because in other words, I would have just called I would have just said, ma'am, you need to put the dog on a leash, whatever. And if she was like, the park ranger, then I'd say, well, then I'll call the park ranger then. And I would have dialed the park ranger and say, yo, this dog is off the leash. Send somebody down here. I don't do that anymore now because all that happens is you wait around for 30 minutes, 40, 50 minutes, wasting your time waiting for the cops to show up. Then basically the cops tell you, well, what do you want me to do? That's what, I'm sorry. Other times it's like, what do you want me to do? So now what you do is what you learn, and maybe he'll learn this. Now what you do is it's like, look, lady, get the damn dog away from me. I'm calling somebody, and then you decide if you want to wait or not, or you just walk away. Because that's what. So this doesn't. This I get it on one level. If their goal was in memorial, mission accomplished, and if you wanted to have a press release to say we're doing this series where we're giving voice to people who basically are voiceless, absolutely. If this was meant to in any way move the conversation to have a more nuanced thing about what she did in this, what the cancel culture that resulted from it and all that. And maybe that wasn't his goal at all. And it may not have been. And as a creator, he has every right as the storyteller of that story to tell that story. But not knowing what his motivation was, if the motivation was just saying, we're remembering these people and we're bringing light to this, attention to this, then fine. If it was meant to spark a conversation, it doesn't. And that's all there is to it. Yeah. This dynamic plays out in so many ways that are more representative of human nature than this. But I think if nothing else, people have to at least be honest about one thing that this story presents, is that there is this idea that if I am black, and I'll even say to some point brown, because like I said, brown people do it to black people all the time, and black people do it to black people to other black people. There's this idea that if I call the police on as a black person, that is a threat to you. And it is legit. Because if anybody's had to deal with the police, and this is why it's in my community, black community, as my father and some other men have told me, they will tell you the last thing you want to do is call the police, because 9 times out of 10, somebody's going to end up getting shot or arrested. Because when they show up there, they are not there to understand your personal problems. You don't want to hear your family history. You don't want to hear even what necessarily happened or the fact that you two have been beefing for a long time. They're just going to resolve it. They're going to resolve it. They're not there to be solid, okay? They're not there to be solid. And I heard from other law enforcement officers, they'll tell you, it's basically, if it's a man and a woman in the situation, 9 times out of 10, no matter who called first, they're going to take the woman's side and lock them up. So that's way too much information for a Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon, and discussion about comics, but it's like, if we all want to have these conversations, guys, we can have these conversations, but they're going to have to be a lot more frank, a lot more honest, a lot more candid, a lot less ideological, a lot less philosophical, if you will, than we're having right now. And it's, I enjoy some of the interactions I have on your channel with some of the guys in YouTube comments. And this is coming from somebody who's trying to be cordial with people, and you get called a fat WWE noogie because they still like what you said. It was the truth. I was all right. So, yeah, DC represents interesting. We'll see how the other chapters go. And like I said, I don't necessarily know if this is the red flags or the smoking gun that some people think that DC is officially woke. As I said before, right now DC has some of y'all right where you want them in terms of if you were looking for any red flags, these could be perceived as red flags. I'll give you that. I just don't think it's a company-wide thing, but I said it certainly don't help DC's case.
So we shall see.
We shall see. That's it. We shall see.
It's to be determined. They did give these comics away for free. It's not like they were charging them. This isn't the Batman, Superman. This isn't Justice League or anything like that in the mainline series. I think we might see more content like this maybe sneak in, or not even sneak in, but be more integrated into their YA graphic novel line. It seems like that would be more that audience. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I know we're out of time. I want to throw one question at you. So I don't know, because in looking up the DC, the Milestone Returns thing, I came across a promo piece of all the DC black characters taking the knee in support of Black Lives Matter. Have you seen that illustration?
Huh.
Okay, so let me throw this at you then. So Icon was one of the ones that was taking the knee illustration. So based on that little clip, that little page that you got that someone sent you, do you think it's in character for Icon to be taking a knee in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement?
I have conservative friends that support Black Lives Matter.
No
not very many. It does
Okay,
seem a little strange.
That's all I'm saying.
People will surprise you every now and again, especially when it's a topical thing.
Yep, that's true. Yep, that's true. So so again, it's we shall see.
Is it like the ice bucket challenge? You just want to be seen on social media being a part of it.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Because at first I was like, why is everybody doing these things? And then I realized it's about, but yeah, it's like
you know what I mean, where it becomes viral and you want to be part of it, and so I'm part of it too.
Yep, exactly. So
that's why you'll never see me take an ice bucket challenge or anything like that. I don't want anyone to think that I'm just part of the crowd, even if I agree with it.
Exactly. You gotta be contrary just for the sake of appearances. But I will say this:
I'm a Gen Xer.
No, I'm Gen X too, man. That's right. It's like, no, we don't care. But I will say this is that with the milestone thing, I would just say creatively, I have not heard really a lot of any positive feedback or comments about it. I think they have a lot of ground to make up at this point. So we'll have to see how the first couple of issues go. I'm really hoping it's not just digital only. I don't know what the promotional plan is.
I do know there's going to be a graphic novel with Static. There's going to be a digital first series with Static, but there's also going to be a print version of Icon and Rocket. Those are the 3 projects that they've announced. So there will be a series, and it kind of makes sense. Static is a younger character, younger audience. Icon is a bit older character, probably somebody that you and I, in theory, could we'll relate to a little bit more. Obviously, we'll see if that happens.
That makes sense. Yeah, then that makes sense. So at least in that area, they at least are recognizing the different the audiences going after. So I tip my hat and give kudos to them on that. And I think at this point, it's really just going to come down to just the storytelling part. That's all. And I think Reggie right now, for those people who are thinking like, he's got a 0 in the con column, and he's got to come up big with something after this. So
a little work to do.
We'll see.
A
lot of work to do. Yep. All right, I enjoyed it, Wes. I hope everybody else did too, and I can't wait to see the comments.
Yeah, I do appreciate it, and thank you to everybody that joined us live here today. This was a fun, insightful conversation.
Yep.
A nice way to have a little Sunday. Well, I guess it's Monday evening here now. It's because it's so late.
Yep,
Monday morning.
All right,
later, brother.
All right, take care, my man. Everyone else too. Take care.